Hello, Celeste.
Hello.
I was thinking, would it be accurate to call you an investigative journalist?
Well, technically, I'm just a writer. My career was in tech, mostly at Microsoft, and then I left the workforce to raise my kids, and I started writing about 10 years ago. My novel, AI Baby, is coming out in February. It's
Congrats.
a humorous speculative fiction about a mother and daughter doing the nutso college admissions thing, and they're while in real time running headlong into artificial intelligence, which is basically changing the game and shifting the world under their feet. So it's been interesting writing that book. I started 3 years ago, and just how much has changed and sort of has come true as I was writing it. So once I finished my novel, I was starting to lose my mind because I just had become so obsessed with AI, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it and researching and I want to just keep writing about it. And so my editor suggested I start a Substack, which was quite brilliant. So that's when Getting Real About AI with Celeste Garcia was born. And so basically, my plan was to sort of demystify AI and help people understand how AI would affect daily life and their futures. And I quickly expanded into accountability because I was just stunned by the ethics and how much there was the ethical violations of big tech as they're racing towards AI in labor, which we're going to discuss a lot today, and also copyright infringement, bias. There's a real lack of women and also people of color. And these systems are going to be influencing daily life for it's really dictating the future. So the only thing I haven't covered too much is safety, but there's only so much time in the day. So really what just started me down the sort of investigative reporter path is when the announcement that Meta had purchased Scale AI for $14.3 billion. I was just curious about what made Alexander Wang, who was the founder, and his company so valuable to Meta. And it was only a 49% stake. So a quick search yielded some really serious labor allegations against Scale AI. And I was stunned that as Alexander Wang was lauded as this hero, boy wonder, self-made billionaire, that nobody was asking him about the labor allegations. And he's done a lot of interviews. So I just started piecing it together. There's been a lot of coverage. Um, but I just started looking at the whole picture, and it was just a it was a lot of sort of obfuscation, and it seemed to be culpability as far as people that were reporting on it. Some people would talk about it, but then others wouldn't, and then it sort of proliferated. And there's it really goes to the highest levels of government, defense, and sort of tech bro power.
And who is Alexander Wang for those people who might not know?
So Alexander Wang is he started the company Scale AI, and he really is a prodigy. He was very, mathlete, and he started working when he was about 17, I believe, or 18 when he was still in high school for Quora. That's when he first met Lucy Guo, who started Scale AI with. And then I joke that they both have what's sort of the tech legend in the making. which is dropping out of a prestigious university. So Alexander dropped out of MIT and Lucy Guo dropped out of Carnegie Mellon. And so they were both sort of these precocious tech prodigies. And Lucy has now sort of faded into the background. She started the company with Alexander. And so he's the son of Los Alamos nuclear physicists. And she's the daughter of engineers. Both of them, their parents are Chinese immigrants. Um, and so they started the company as a part of the accelerator Y Combinator, and it was their summer of 2016 batch. Um, and what's really interesting is that Lucy Guo, she left in 2018, and there's a lot of conflicting stories about why, and some say she was fired, some say it was she left over a difference of how to run the company. But now she's been completely erased from Alexander Wang's origin stories, and whenever he talks about starting Scale AI, she's never mentioned. So he's now become sort of this legendary billionaire at 24. And he's hailed as the guy who built the data factory for AI.
Yeah, because scale AI plays such an important role in the AI game, but people don't really hear that much about them. It's not like Microsoft or OpenAI or Anthropic. What is scale AI exactly? Could you explain that?
Well, so Lucy and Alexander realized the insatiable need of these large language models and generative AI in general for data. And what people don't realize is it's not magic. The data there's a really an arduous process for the data to be prepared. You can't just take raw data and feed it into an AI model. So it has to be structured and cleaned and annotated and tagged. And it actually takes armies of flesh and blood human laborers. And so Lucy and Alexander realized, this is really one of the pillars of modern AI. And so that, they built up the company quickly and they ended up, for pretty much every single major AI model, Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, they were readying the data. So, and then part of part of the real genius of this company was that they also realized, that they started moving into sort of the end-to-end aspect of it to help Fortune 500 companies embed AI into their internal workflows. But what got me interested in it was that there's these, these armies of nameless, faceless gig workers readying the data, and that, there's a there the labor there's just a lot of egregious labor violations. Do you want me to discuss what the allegations are?
Yes, please.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's so many. So there's a lot of evidence.
And
There's
and and and,
lawsuits.
and when you say allegations, could you specify who made these allegations exactly?
Yes, so there's a lot of labor allegations. And there's lawsuits, there's whistleblower accounts, and then there's, investigative reporting. Um, and it initially sort of the initial news broke, I believe was the Washington Post ran a story in 2023 about the overseas labor violations where people were describing really grueling conditions and they were being paid pennies on the dollar, like less than $10 an hour for 8 hours worth of work. And the way that they've set it up is that there's these platforms that the gig workers sign on to, and the training, they weren't paid for the training part of it. And then each task assigned for, the data annotations, they had sort of arbitrary timelines, and then um, they would get shut out if they didn't complete the task on time. And there were a lot of allegations of sort of, maybe not getting paid. But there were these layers and layers that Scale AI had set up so that there was really no recourse for these workers, and there was no way to, if they didn't get paid or they were shut out, there was no way to address it. So there were those allegations. And what was crazy was 60 Minutes did a story in November of 2024, so last year at this time, about the overseas um, labor issues. And this was a story done by Leslie Stahl. And what was so crazy is she never mentioned Alexander Wang's name. And, I grew up watching 60 Minutes. It used to be, they would show up on the doorstep of the CEO. And so, again, like what sort of confounded me and why I got so interested in this story was why there was just this pattern of it seemed to be protecting Alexander Wang, and why nobody, even when there were big stories done, and there wasn't a ton in mainstream media outside of the Washington Post and um, 60 Minutes, why nobody was ever talking about Alexander Wang. And by the time 60 Minutes did that story, Alexander Wang had already become sort of a celebrity because he was hailed as the first billionaire at 24 years old. And so the fact that they would be doing this story on hideous labor violations, and they mostly talked to workers in Kenya about in Nairobi, Kenya, about um, lack of pay, lack of transparency, and then just the disturbing content that they were required to look at and label. That how it wasn't discussed who was actually responsible for all of this. Um, so again, it just became this pattern. And then the Department of Labor investigation was never, to my knowledge, the first reports never came out until March 6th. TechCrunch wrote a story about the Department of Labor investigation. And this involved not just the gig workers, but it involved people who had been hired by a company called Higher Art, which not so not only was Scale AI, they had to outsource the the grueling sort of data labeling, but then they also had a ton of contractors that they hired through two different contracting companies, or companies that provide labor, and that was Higher Art and Upwork. And so I actually started talking to one of the whistleblowers. I was contacted by a whistleblower, and so I've been in contact with this person and have had hours of discussions. I honestly think maybe part of the reason why there was a lack of reporting on this is because it was so complicated because of just the different layers. So the contractors were basically doing the work of what should have been considered full-time W-2 employees of Scale AI. And they were initially they started as hourly workers, and they weren't getting benefits of any kind. But then sort of arbitrarily at some point, Scale AI, who was dictating their day-to-day work, which that in and of itself should have been a trigger to start a DOL investigation for labor violations, then they would arbitrarily,
Sorry, a DLM investigation.
oh,
What's that?
DOL, so sorry, that's
DOL.
Department of Labor.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you for asking me that. And I think there's a tendency to throw around a lot of different acronyms in AI in general, and then in once you get the government involved. So the investigation, from what I've ascertained, the Department of Labor investigation began in August of 2024. And so my contact that got involved with the Department of Labor investigation in October of 2024, um, because there had been a mass layoff of these contract workers. And so then this person was invited into a Discord group, and then some of the people in this Discord group were already involved in the Department of Labor investigation. And so it really, I mean, it should have been sort of an open and shut case for the Department of Labor, and they felt really confident that it would, in fact, uh, be, be a case that they were able to win.
Can I jump
So
in for 1 second?
yes.
I'm just wondering, when you say labor exploitation, I suppose that the labor exploitation is happening outside of the US. Is that correct?
Well, so that's what makes it complicated, because there were two layers of it. Because there was the labor exploitation allegations that came out first outside of the US. And this was involving the gig workers. And the gig workers at Scale, they're basically working through a platform, and it's called Remote Tasks. And so the people outside the US don't even have any idea who the parent company is that they're actually working for. And then inside the US, that platform where gig workers can sign up, because people will do it just to earn some extra money. That platform is called Outlier. And there's were allegations, similar allegations in the US to the allegations outside of the US.
Okay.
So, what triggered, so basically, once the Department of Labor started looking into the matter, they weren't, they can't do anything about something outside of the US, but they were looking at not only what was going on with the gig workers working on the platform, Outlier, but also with the contractors. And I believe it was the contractors who were working for HireArt, who probably initially went to the Department of Labor, but the contractors were not only aware of that they should have been classified as full-time workers, and should have been eligible for benefits and things like healthcare and stock options.
And when you
Uh,
say a low pay, what are we talking here?
well, so the contractors that were working for like HireArt, they were paid higher wages. For example, the person that I've been talking with that was a whistleblower, um, they were brought in for a certain amount of expertise that they have, and then also to manage people below them as the sort of this process, the complicated process of getting the data deployment ready. So basically, it starts with the gig workers that are just interfacing with their computer all day long and annotating and labeling data. And then the contractors who were all then helping to manage that process and then to bring it along as to, because then once the sort of the initial data is labeled and then it's tokenized, and then once it's in the once it's been tokenized, then the people on sort of the upper level, the contractors, start to input. um they do queries, and then they start refining the process. So that part of the process is RLF, which is reinforcement learning, human feedback. So I would say that they were sort of higher up on the food chain, but they were being abused as well. So the contractors were more, the abuse was more of just mislabeling them, where they should have been, because of the work that they were doing, and that they should have been classified as full-time employees. So again, I think that's partly why there's just been a lack of like really a holistic coverage of this, because it's really complicated.
Yeah, it's just
And
really
of course, that's
complicated.
by design, right?
Hmm.
Because it's just so opaque. The fact that like the gig workers really had no idea even who they were working for. And then it was, s- and then and then they had no idea who the end customer was, because Scale takes the raw, most of the time took the raw data from, let's say, OpenAI, and then refined that data to get it to deployment ready, and took it through all the steps. But so the gig workers not only didn't know that they were working for Scale AI, but they also wouldn't have known who the end customer was, whether it was Microsoft, Meta, or OpenAI.
And do you have an intuition about as AI's capabilities become better and better, will there be more need for these kinds of workers, or will there be less of a need?
That's a really good question. And I mean, I think that definitely the frontier labs and any of the companies on the forefront of developing these big AI models, it would be in their interest to take the human out of the loop, right? Because it's a huge exposure point for them. And rather than paying these people at, and giving them a living wage and um, good working conditions, and they could be really elevating these people and uplifting them, which, all of these big tech firms, that's what they like to talk about with AI, is it's going to elevate humanity. And the great uh, irony of it is that along this process, they're doing the exact opposite. But I think for now, nobody's been able to figure out how to do this process without humans, because they're taking basically there's the whole bottleneck of data, and they're basically taking anything they can get their hands on. And another aspect of it, which I've talked about a lot, is the copyright infringement, because they're taking works, that pirated works, um, and um, and then scraping just about anything and everything off the internet. And so obviously there, you can't simply just take this raw data off the internet. I mean, it's
Hmm.
so I don't know if, I mean, obviously the goal would be for AI at some point to be able to cleanse the data. And I mean, I imagine at some point it will, after, there's been enough cycles and it's um, been trained well enough. And now there is synthetic data, which actually seems really confusing, but it's sort of data that's been iterated enough times that then the AI can produce it. So that might be where they're eventually moving. So
Hmm.
that's that. Yeah, I think that just remains to be seen.
And it's quite, a difficult challenge to deal with because, first of all, we're very dependent on digital platforms and digital systems, and we're increasingly becoming more and more dependent on AI. So we know that this kind of labor exploitation is going on. We know that there are many people who work under demeaning conditions and they are not paid nearly enough, and so on and so forth. But how can we really respond to it? Because we know that, the AI revolution, development, progress, whatever you want to call it, is really dependent on these poor people who are, feeding the AIs with data and categorizing the data and so on and so forth. So we depend on these people. We actually depend a bit on exploitation for this AI to work, it seems like. What do you think? Not the solution is like I'm not answering. I'm not asking you to come up with the solution, but how should people respond to this? Should people just ignore it, or should we? What can we do?
Well, I think what's astonishing is it just shouldn't be happening at all. I mean, I think that just holding big tech accountable. And, I think it's ironic that they talk about, AI as sort of the new industrial revolution. And I didn't realize that they actually meant the same type of labor conditions. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so I think, just talking about it, writing about it, and if, people can support people who are talking and writing about it, and, just building awareness because it does not have to be that way. And I think what's astounding is, you have these companies that are, their stock prices are going through the roof. These companies have trillion-dollar valuations. And then these people like Alexander Wang that are billionaires, and it would be nothing. It would be a rounding error to pay these people a livable wage and to honor basic standards of labor. So I think right now, I mean, again, just people need to be aware. And there are some organizations that have formed. Stanford uh, has an institute. It's called the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. Oxford, there's Oxford Institute for Ethics in AI. Incidentally, actually, they ranked Scale AI is not the only company that does the data labeling, and they ranked a lot of these companies specifically on the aspects of labor. And Scale AI got a 1 out of a possible 10 points, 10 being the
Wow.
highest. And there were very cute few companies that got a decent rating. And in fact, that would be something to look at as far as, if you, and again, like trying to look at the companies that are making efforts for ethical AI. And it's not just labor. I mean, there's a whole slew of ethics involved. And, I think when you look at a company like Scale AI and why they've been able to act with impunity is because Alexander Wang has worked his way up to the highest levels of government and world politics. I mean, not just Donald Trump, but he's met with Modi and Starmer and Macron, and so like it's it feels like this manipulation where they have. I mean, it's not by mistake that they're um, they want influence at the highest levels of government because it's really given them impunity. And, the great irony also is that they all talk about it like it's, in the US, it's a matter of defense, which has allowed them to justify any of their egregious ethical violations, whether it's copyright or, not adhering to certain safety standards or certainly labor. But yeah, I think, at least we can start with awareness. And, certain companies I think have tried to and be more cognizant of ethics. And but I would say most of the big ones, or really all of them, have certain culpability in ethics violations. So obviously I use AI. I use it a lot. I use it in my research. I use Notebook LLM, which is a Google product. I use ChatGPT a lot. I use Microsoft Copilot. So, right now there's a lot of cognitive dissonance around that. But again, I mean, I'm just trying to be as sound, as loud as I can and continue to write and talk about the violations and hopefully at some point there will be some sort of guidelines. One thing that's very interesting about and what's going on, particularly in the US, and why the tech bros who used to not be too political, and now why they've obviously really become so political, is, regulation is not a friend of AI and of the big AI models. And so as long as they can, they're going to do everything to keep our government from regulating AI.
Agreed. Okay, Celeste, thank you so much for bringing awareness to these issues, and thank you for your time here today. It's great talking with you.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.